welcome to the Handsell with Ron Hogan and my guest today, Robin Sloan. Robin is the author of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, which has just come out in paperback from Picador. It's a great book about bookstores and computers and design and the interaction of all of these things in intriguing and complex ways. And that actually sort of leads up to a new thing that you've got coming out that is related to that.
Yeah, that's right. This is a short prequel to the novel. It's called Ajax Penumbra, 1969. And this is actually a little bit misleading because it's primarily a digital short to accompany the paperback release of the novel. I wrote this over the summer. Picador and FSG collaborated to bring it out, and it's essentially the story of this guy, Mr. Penumbra, and how he arrived in San Francisco back in the year 1969.
And it's, as you said, primarily a digital short, but I see you do have a print copy here. Are these fairly limited edition, or?
It is limited edition, and it's limited in a funny way. Not only are there not too many of them, we're actually only distributing them at bookstores, at events, so people have to come into their favorite indie bookstore and buy a copy of the paperback, or maybe just ask nicely, and they can get one of these.
How fun was it to go back and revisit the world for this?
It was really fun. I would say that it was a different experience because for the novel, there wasn't much research in the traditional sense because it was just my world. It was things that I had been interested in for a long time and things that I had lived through myself. So I guess my life was the research for a long time. I was not around in San Francisco in the year 1969. And so a big chunk of the summer was reading. You know, it was a great excuse to read about this city that I feel like I understand, reading and learning.
The way that the Handsell works is that readers like you send me lists of books that you've enjoyed, and then I come to bookstores like McNally Jackson, where I'm here today, and I recruit authors or booksellers sometimes, and we take a look at your lists, and then we see what we can come up with. And we have a really interesting list from Tom in Rhode Island today. Tom has 4 books that he liked. They were Neal Stephenson's Anathem, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams, John Le Carré's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and Jorge Luis Borges' Labyrinths. That was a really interesting, I mean, the first 2 are clearly science fiction, with a quirky little elements to both of them, and then you go into the thriller world, and then you go into Borges, which is, you know, just kind of its own universe. And I thought that they all kind of resonated neatly with your reading interests.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love this list because I love all these books too, so I feel like it is almost a little bit too easy for me to recommend something, anything. In fact, I kind of want to ask Tom for some recommendations too, like what else is he reading? But I will tell you, I had an immediate instinct, and this might be obvious to Tom out there in the world, but especially given the sort of the wide scope, you know, the kind of epic grandeur of a book like Anathem, or even Borges, which always has that. It's always like kind of opening things up, and there's always infinite libraries, you know, and like long spans of time. If you kind of mix that with, I think, the playfulness of Douglas Adams and some of the, I don't want to say goofy, but the fun side of science fiction, I think Foundation, the first Foundation novel by Isaac Asimov, is a clear recommendation. It's got the scope and the sweep, and it's from that era of science fiction when things were just kind of wacky and fun.
And then you had another one that was a little closer to the present day as well.
Yeah, that's right, and only because I feel like Foundation might be a little too obvious, you know. And so, in case Foundation is already off the list or on the shelf, I think that the Kefahuchi Tract trilogy by this British writer named M. John Harrison would actually be a great next step. In a way, it actually has a lot in common with, say, Dirk Gently, the sort of those funny little twists of noir, like sort of science fiction noir, but in a playful way, except I'd say that Harrison puts like a coat of dark paint or dark varnish over the whole thing, and probably dials up the weirdness a little bit.
The first book that came to my mind is I was trying to think of something that had like the action of Stevenson and the kind of quirkiness and surrealness of Dirk Gently, but also that kind of thriller aspect of Le Carré, and then just, again, the odd weirdness of Borges, is a book that came out about a year or so ago called Angelmaker by Harkaway. It's just a really amazing It's got thriller elements, but it's got elements of the fantastic. It's kind of like next generation steampunk almost, because it's clearly not steampunk, but it's like, well, what if you took that sort of like driving philosophy behind steampunk in terms of playfulness with technology and applied it to a different era and a different genre? And it's just such an amazingly fun and inventive book, and I just cannot recommend it highly enough. So there's a lot of great reading for you to do there, and I hope that we haven't picked books that Tom has already found. But if you would like a list of your own for us to give to you, then just tell me about 3 or 4 books that you've enjoyed. You can do that by twittering me at Ron Hogan on Twitter, or go to thehandsell.com/ask, and there's a little dialogue box that you can type in the titles and all that. And I'll come to a bookstore, and we will see what we can do. In the meantime, from McNally Jackson in downtown Manhattan, I've been talking to Robin Sloan, the author of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, and you've been watching The Handsell. Thank you.